Namaste, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Musings of a Modern Mystic with me, Amy Yasmin. So, I invite you to settle into the space wherever you are. Join me in a nice deep breath, just landing in this moment. So, welcome to today's episode. I felt to share a bit about my story, offer some context, kind of know where life's a spiral, right? Everything started somewhere that started somewhere. The journey that brought me to where I am today, to wanting to share this podcast channel, is based on the experiences I had a few years ago. So if I rewind to, it was pre-COVID pandemic around 2017, 2018. And I'd been working 3 jobs and studying a university degree. And once the university finished, I stepped up with work. I was outwardly, on paper, I felt that I was successful. I had a decent financial standing for my age, I felt. I had 3 jobs. I had a job that I was passionate about, and yet something wasn't working out. I was working 6 or 7 days a week, sometimes, and I was regularly burned out. I was regularly run down. I always felt behind, and it got to the point where things had built up to the point I was like, I can't do this anymore. And it took many weeks to make the decision to leave one of my jobs, to try and lighten the load and see if that would make a difference. And it felt like a big step because it had been the longest serving job that I'd done. I'd been there for 8 years, knew all the people, knew the ins and outs of it. And yet it was a job. I'd started there to make an income during college. So it felt big to let go of that. And when I handed in my resignation, I was surprised at how much of an anticlimax in some ways it was. It wasn't, I thought it was going to be this big thing. I thought people would try and persuade me otherwise. And yet it was just accepted, and it was like, oh, okay, this is happening. And I did feel lighter for it initially. And then a few weeks down the line, and my mind's starting to think, well, we're not making the income we were, Amy. Aware of where my savings were, where I would like them to be at, where I'd expected and projected that I was intending to be. And so I invited more work in my present workplaces, and I took on extra shifts, extra responsibilities, extra paperwork. I didn't stop to think about the implications of any of that. I just did it. And it was only several weeks, a couple of months into this, that I'm starting to realise I'm not enjoying this as my work as much anymore because of the new responsibilities and the new things I've taken on. And work had also come into home as well. So I never felt like I was getting away from work because I was working from the laptop from home. And it reached a point where I was so despondent, so drained, I'd literally hide in the toilet. I would literally hide in the toilets at work, to not have to face other people. I found it hard to even show up for the day. It was enough effort to get through those hours in work, and anything else I had no time or energy for. So this was building up until one night a friend actually came and visited me, and that was the moment I really realised something had to change, and if that was going to change, I had to do something about it. And this was when my best friend pulled up outside the workplace I was at the time with a gift bag full of rescue remedy and a spray to put on my pillow at night, just some self-care stuff. And I was like, oh my goodness, I held back the tears. I could have dissolved in her arms that night. And yet I was like, no, we need to stay stoic. We've got work. The kids are going to be rocking up. I can't look like I've been crying. So it was still all this pent up frustration, tiredness, all these feelings I'd been pushing down. And seeing her there that night made me realise this isn't for her to do. She's gone out of her way. She's got a busy life and lots going on too. I really need to do something. Clearly, for her to go this out of her way, she's concerned. And yeah, look at me. So I really turned from that moment and was like, right, let's listen. So I stopped. And that night I reflected, and the next morning, so I couldn't vacillate, I booked an appointment at the doctor's. And I still to this day can't remember what I actually said in the doctor's. I don't recall how honest I was, because I'd been holding my feelings in for so long. I don't know. I can't recall what it was that I said to him. But I must have described how I was doing in work and in general, because I walked out of the doctor's with a note in my hand declaring me, like a sick note that was for a week-long sick note, for low mood, stress, I think is the standard in general. Although at the time I was like, oh my goodness, what my employer's going to think, is it going to be some mental health kind of, like there still felt like there was connotations around your mental well-being and what are they going to think if I'm not doing okay, if I'm not able to do my job all the time. And didn't think about how common sick notes could be, stress, anything like that. I was completely orientated to what are the implications of this from other people. And I was kind of judging it for me as well. So for a bit more personal context as well, I'd also journeyed through an eating disorder for many years. So I was a bit concerned about this kind of, oh my goodness, I'm admitting I'm not coping, like that's not okay. There was this like perfectionist streak, this desire to always be this fountain of positivity and of health and to look like I had my life together. Because everyone else in some ways seemed to, or I expected it in my life. So I've got a sick note for a week, and actually just making a phone call to call in sick, that was a massive challenge in itself. That felt like a massive hurdle. I was told I needed to say the words, I am unfit to work. And this was before I did anything around affirmations and understanding the significance of those words, I am, and what I put around that, how I define myself. Because I wanted to scream, look, there's nothing wrong with me. It's not me. Like, it's the circumstance. It's just everything's piled up. This is just the straw that broke the camel. I've just been carrying too much for too long. And so I felt like it was a personal inflection of shame, of failure in some way. So I took it quite hard in some ways, but that week was in itself a gift, and it was accepted. It wasn't that phone call on their end. Work took it as it was straightforward. It wasn't a big thing that I'd made it out to be. So I've got this week now, and at first I felt a bit lost. To not be busy and doing and having a million and one things to do, there was relief in it, but then there was also like this underlying restlessness because I didn't know what to do. And my mum came home the one day and she said, so what have you been up to today? How are you doing? And that was a real eye-opener for me, because I realised I'd been sat in the same chair and I hadn't moved all day, and I hadn't realised how much time had passed. And so I was like, right, tomorrow's a different day. So I decided to pick up journaling. I decided I needed to reflect. I needed some time and space. And that was one way to get my head clear. And I quite enjoyed writing. So I started to reflect on what wasn't working out. Get everything out of my head, and just on paper, it's a bit easier to prioritise for me. That works well for me. And I realised that the self-care basics weren't there. So over the course of that week, I was able to take stock and go, right, my eating habits are appalling. They're for convenience, they're sporadic, they're not even guaranteed 2 meals a day, let alone, I wasn't giving my body what it needed, and I knew it. and I had any number of reasons or excuses for why that couldn't be. The same with my sleeping. I noticed my stress levels. So I made a note of all these things that could do with room for improvement, right? In school we used to call it room for improvement, room for growth. And I tried to go at them all at once. Quickly became overwhelmed again. But it was just in reflecting, I was able to realise where things weren't working out for me and what areas I wanted to bring more of my time and attention to. So, learning through trial and error, I started to introduce progressively more simple, straightforward changes to those areas of my life that might support me. So, I made a bit of a plan and a bit more structure around my eating. Set more intentions around eating. And a few around sleeping as well, because my sleeping patterns were so poor. I was getting less than 6 hours a night. I had no sleep routine. I was texting people late into the night. And I knew that needed to change. So just taking a few small steps to self-care from 1 week of just pausing all the spinning plates made the world of difference to me. In that 1 week, a snowball had started in a really positive way, and in a way I'd never expected. I'm so glad I gave myself that time. I'm so glad I went and asked for the help when I needed it, to give myself the time and space I needed, because in having time to myself and for self-reflection, my whole life began to take a whole new trajectory, to the point I became aware again how much I wanted to travel. I'd long dreamed of it. And these things that had just been a pipe dream, all of a sudden, I realised I could make them more real. And I'd worked for years and years for these savings, and I was going, actually, why am I doing this? I was in a rut of just working to earn more savings, to mortgage, and to, the conveyor belt of all the next steps of independent life, of growing up once university's finished and gone. What about living for living? Like, I hadn't really had a holiday. I worked 3 jobs, so taking time off from 3 jobs took a lot of time and organising, and I ended up not bothering and getting paid overtime instead. And so I reevaluated and I went, right, I'm going to travel. And it was from that point, in listening to those dreams and taking steps towards, right, let's just look it up on the internet. That is what led me ultimately to reach a point within a 12 to 18 month period of resigning from that first job, of having that sick note. Within that time period, I travelled around Europe with my brother, which was an incredible experience in itself, and it really helped me to see there was so much more out there in the world. My world had become so closed. Part of why I felt so stagnant, so heavy, so fed up, was because I was living the same day in, day out. I was with the same people in the same places. Holidays were non-existent. There was no variety. And not that I necessarily needed to go on holiday. But at the same time, being in a new place really benefited me. Realising there was new cultures, there was new people, there was so much more out there. It started to open my horizons and help me to dream new dreams again. And before I knew it, I'd applied to Camp America to apply the skills that I'd already got from work in a new environment, new place, new experience. And there was some anxiety with that. There was a massive paperwork process. There was many barriers I could have stopped myself at, and instead I pushed through the discomfort. And because I pushed through that discomfort, I found myself in a position where I was going to go on a one-way ticket. I bought a one-way ticket to New Zealand for a working holiday that came through in 2 days of the application, and going, wow, okay, this is really happening. And instead of extensively planning, I was just ready to go. I was ready to soar, to let go of everything and to just be somewhere new, to be somewhere different, for everything to just have a clean slate, a fresh outlook, a fresh Just time to explore and rediscover the world, myself, my passions, on a one-way ticket. And I could never have imagined that from that time I was in the doctors, from that time I was so down and so heavy, I'd sit in a chair all day. I had no energy, no motivation, such little regard for myself, such little passion. From 1 week. From one friend helping me to stop and take stock and realise I needed to do something. So I invite you now to give yourself that pause. To reflect now in yourself around self-care. In a world that can be so full of pulling, just pause and ask yourself, what most serves me to be aware of now? What does it most serve me to be aware of now? And you can journal it, you can reflect. Just think what first comes to mind. Is there any areas of your life, or of self-care especially, that you feel, if only I had a bit more time, I'd love to do this. I could probably be doing this. I should probably be doing that. Whether it's sleeping, eating, time for yourself, or hobbies or passions. Just reflect. And once you've done that, look back at that list or think back over them reflections and take it really simply and ask yourself, if there was one really simple thing I could do within this next week or tomorrow, today, what one thing could I introduce that might make a difference to that? Whether that's planning to eat a healthy meal, planning to eat a sit-down meal that's free of distractions, or allowing yourself, right, I'm going to go to bed at 10 o'clock, I'm going to set an alarm or a timer, and I'm going to switch off Netflix or whatever series might be trying to reel in for another episode, just one more. Whatever reasons you give for making unhealthy, well, not unhealthy, but for patterns and habits that you'd like to change or that you feel might benefit you from changing. To stop and go, right, what one thing could I do? Well, I could switch my phone off an hour before bed. Or I could dim the lights to start getting me ready for bed. If there's anything you could introduce, just simple, straightforward, 5 minutes, realistic, something you could do every day or once a week to give yourself some time or space for that, what could it be? And then begin to notice. Begin to pay more attention to any changes, any new opportunities that might come up. Because for me, that 1 week of taking stock, that pause, was enough for me to start a ball rolling for a greater sense of awareness around self-care, around my sense of self and what ignites me, what lights me up, what I was living for, what I was, just to have a full, happy, healthy, genuine outlook on life that wasn't all about what I thought I should be doing or what I thought I should be thinking. To have some time to just pause, to acknowledge the feelings, the frustrations, and to just sit with it and go, what one thing, let's just focus on one thing at a time. What one way can I support myself now? And then begin to notice. And as well, consistency can be key. When I initially started self-care time, I set a timer for 5 minutes to read a day. Because I needed that timer to help me to give myself that commitment. So, I invite you to give it a go. Let me know how that goes for you. You can write it in the comments. Feel free to share this with anyone that might benefit. Put a comment on it and let me know how that's gone. And see what changes might come into your life. So, I'm Amy Yasmin, and you've been listening to Musings of a Modern Mystic. Thank you for joining me. Take care, and I'll see you next time.